Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Denver Public Library Saturday Matinee. My name is Daria, and our all-powerful co-host is Andrew. Today, we are bringing you the discussion of Let the Right One In. It's a Swedish movie about friendship and tenderness. It also just happens to have vampires. Remember to light up the chat with your comments, any questions you might have about this movie. Don't worry about taking notes. The film and book recommendations will be emailed after this finishes. And I would also like to add, it is my pleasure to see everyone's faces after our short hiatus. It's really wonderful. And now, with a show of jazz hands, please give me a hand and welcome in the one, the only film critic, Walter Chaw, and the film director, illustrator, and writer, Peter Ramsey.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see everybody's faces again. To Daria's point, this has been a sort of a refuge or a life raft in the middle of all of this year, and I hope that some of you feel a little bit the same way. I'm really excited to talk about this film today, and I thought about preparing an introduction, sort of talking about the history of Swedish cinema, but you're not. Hey, we're not made out of stone. That's super interesting, but kind of boring. So let's talk instead very briefly about the history of vampires. Vampires have been around since we've been telling stories to each other, as far as we can tell. The centuries and centuries old texts reveal vampires, Chinese texts, Greek texts. In ancient Greece, they're called lamia or impusa or striga. The first two kinds, the lamia and the impusa, are both sexual vampires. I think the lamia, in fact, turns into a snake after she's had her way with you, gentlemen and women. The last one, the striga, turns into a bird after whatever it is that they do to you. In ancient Assyria or Babylonia, it was called the Ikimu. In Imperial Rome, it was called the Lemure. And it's interesting to me about the Lemures because sometimes we would excavate the old Roman sites, you'd find bodies buried with heavy stones, millstones, on top of them. And it was to prevent them from rising again. There was this idea that if you had done something in your life that was unholy, if you were born with red hair, for instance, it was not good. There was a lot of reasons that you were, if you're left-handed, but there was a danger that you would come back from the dead. I think if you were a victim of murder or if you were a victim of suicide, that these were also reasons that you would rise from the dead. So the Lemure from ancient Rome. If you are thinking, hey, does that have anything to do with lemurs? Those monkey things, lemurs? It does. When they were first giving the taxonomy for lemurs, they were seen sort of as slinking around in the dark and sort of vaguely humanoid. And so he said, hey, they're like the lemure, they're lemurs. If you are well versed in letters and you've read Goethe's Faust, Mephistopheles, he's trailed by a group of lemurs who help dig Faust's grave at one point. In Druidic Ireland, they were called the Dirgduls, vampires were. In India, there are the Beitel and the Vetala. In Norse mythology, they're the Draugr. In China, there are the Qingshi. And it's interesting in China because they hop in China. They sort of hop up and down. Their arms are sort of like outstretched and they hop. There's a whole series of hopping vampire movies that I would highly recommend that you watch for just sort of your daily dose of what the heck am I watching? It was thought because of rigor mortis that you couldn't bend your limbs and things after death. So your arms would sort of stick out and your legs, your knees don't work anymore. So vampires hopped. And when you're watching the series of hopping vampire movies, I hope you do, from China, they evolve to the point where they really wuxia hop. They hop liters and miles into the air, and it's just it's crazy. It's very far from the European sense of what vampires are. In Malaysia, they're the Lengsuir, the Penetkiak, the Penagalan. They're all very beautiful women in Malaysia. In Africa, they have vampires as well. The Abanbasam, the Owengo, and the Otig Jiruru were vampires. You go more into modern times. Even modern Greece has the Vrikokla. I can't. It's Greek. Okay, Bulgaria has the Obur. Chile has the Puchin. Scotland has something called the Boaban Sith, which sounds like a Star Wars character. She's a beautiful woman in a long green dress. It has to be long because she has to hide that her feet are actually deer hooves. Lots of stories about travelers traveling in Scotland who stop in camp and they talk with each other and they say, man, I really wish my wife was here, or I miss my girlfriend. And all of a sudden, these Baob and Sith would show up and seduce them. The stories always have one person who doesn't partake, who either doesn't miss their wife or has an angry dog, and they survive. But they live to tell the tale. But they're beautiful women in Scotland. Romania has the Strigoi and the Morai. Hungary has the Pangri and the Vampire. Russia has the Upir or the Opir. The Balkans and Serbia have the Vlodak or the Vampire. In 1943, there's a film called Isle of the Dead that Ukrainian filmmaker producer Val Lutin produced for RKO Pictures. And in Isle of the Dead, it's one of these Balkan creatures. In Germany, there's the Vampire, the Nachzerer. France, there's the vampire. Italy, Spain, Vampiro. Mexico, Vampiro. So why are vampires such a constant in our mythologies? I think there's a lot of taboos that are addressed by vampires, or vampires just exist. That's an idea. But there are lots of taboos addressed by vampires. They seem to be stories largely about the fear and the attempt to control female sexuality. A lot of the eroticism that we see in vampire literature and vampire film addresses some of taboo topics like LGBTQ topics, which let the right one sort of glances off of it in a way. But there's eroticism. I mean, one of Dracula's powers is the ability to seduce women. I've always thought of vampires as rock stars. They wear leather, they come out at night, they look pale and haggard, and they get all the ladies. There's an addiction quality to vampirism as well that's been explored by filmmakers like Abel Ferrara or Jim Jarmusch most recently, where it's a fix that you need as a vampire. In the great 1987 vampire movie Near Dark, Caleb, the main character of that film, who recently pissed off Natalie Maines to such an extent that she wrote an entire album about it, which is withering. Why would you first cheat on Natalie Maines, but then cheat on somebody who's so articulate about her rage? That's just seems like a bad idea from the start. But anyway, he plays the vampire in Near Dark, and at one point, as he's changing, he seems really strung out and he can't hold down food. A police detective asks what he's on. So this sort of allegory for that transgression laps over into vampirism as well. There's a demonization of immigrants, that they're coming for your women, these strange foreigners. Most recently, our last president was elected partly on this idea that there are rapists coming from south of the border, but this idea of the suave or the myth of African American male sexuality, all of this stuff is wrapped up in vampirism as well to some extent. There was a great blaxploitation a vampire movie called Blackula that came out, which it's a funny title. It's actually quite an interesting film if you ever are interested in doing it. One of the biological roots of vampirism perhaps is porphyria, the whole family of diseases, especially one shortened as EPP. I can't even begin to pronounce what that stands for, but it's a kind of porphyria where you have burning and blistering when you're exposed to even ultraviolet light, any kind of sunlight. So you stay kind of in the dark. You're chronically anemic, which makes you tired and pale. And nowadays, if you have it, you're sort of prescribed blood infusions as part of the treatment. But it's thought that self-treatment might have involved in the past animals and things like just trying to drink blood. There's this draw to it. If you've seen The Others, the Alejandro Almodovar film starring Nicole Kidman, I think those kids had porphyria. But some of those things. Some serial killers in the past have identified themselves as vampires, including, really interestingly, this guy named Giles de Rais, who fought in Joan of Arc's army, a really valiant sort of hero of France. After her betrayal and burning at the stake, he became a private citizen and began to abduct young boys and bathe in their blood. Elizabeth Bathory in Hungary, of course, in the 16th century, she had a manservant named Thorko, which I love. but a lot of movies have been made about her. She believed that bathing in the blood of young women, especially young virgin women, would give her eternal life. She took, I think, up to 600 young women this way during her little reign. In Germany, there was a serial killer named Peter Kürten who called himself the Vampire of Dusseldorf. And also in Germany, Fritz Haarmann also preyed on young boys and was the basis for Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street. He was a barber, and he used human meat for his sausages at some point. Vampires have seeped not only from mythology, obviously, but into literature first. Keats wrote a poem called Lamia, where there's this line: "When from this wreathed tomb shall I awake? When move in a sweet body fit for life and love and pleasure and the ruddy strife of hearts and lips? Ah, miserable me." Goethe wrote a poem called The Bride of Corinth, which is about a vampire as well. In 1819, there was a famous party. Lots of drugs were involved, absinthe too, laudanum probably, between a couple of poets, one of their wives and a mistress, and a doctor friend of theirs named Dr. John Polidori. And over the course of one night, they had a contest. They said, you know what, let's try to scare each other. Let's write the scariest story, or think of the scariest story that we can think of, and we'll tell it to each other, and then we'll decide who wins. The person who won is the wife of one of the poets, Mary Shelley. Her story became Frankenstein. But Dr. Polidori wrote a story called The Vampire, and it's just sort of about this relationship between an accomplished man and a guy who looks up to him, sort of the same relationship that he had with Lord Byron, the other poet, at this party. And The Vampire, when it was first published, was thought to be a short story by Byron. It was debunked, just as Frankenstein, when it was initially published, was thought to be written by Percy, but I'm not a fan of Percy. Anyway, that's a different. During England, there were penny dreadfuls, these sort of little short pamphlets that were serialized over the course of hundreds, sometimes volumes. One of the most popular ones during this period was Varney the Vampire in the 1840s. It ran over 200 serialized stories. At the end of it, in a fit of despair, and it was interesting, Varney the Vampire, because he had a lot of remorse about what he did. It was at the end of it, he kills himself by throwing himself into a volcano. Lots of references to that, not only in like Sherlock Holmes's death and over a waterfall about 50 years later, but in The Great Joe versus the Volcano, where Tom Hanks volunteers to go. But anyway, there's Varney the Vampire. In Russia, Gogol did a wonderful story about vampires called The Vi. If you are in the know, in 1967, there was a Russian film that was an adaptation of this called The Vi. It's a movie that you've never seen before if you've never seen it. It's amazing. It's amazing, amazing. Okay. Alexis Tolstoy, the brother of better-known Leo, did 4 short stories, a quartet of stories about vampires around this period of time as well. In 1871, a really influential book called Camilla was published by Sheridan Le Fanu. Took a lot of the eroticism to a very Victorian place, but an interesting place, a lesbian relationship. Bram Stoker follows with a little book called Dracula in 1897. And thank you, Daria, for the vibreel from Bram Stoker's Dracula at the very beginning of this. I could go on, and I have already. H.G. Wells wrote a vampire story. E.F. Benson. H.P. Lovecraft wrote a vampire story about a vampire house. Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a vampire story about an energy vampire called the Parasite. Algernon Blackwood, Clark Ashton Smith, Harlan Ellison did a great vampire story called Try a Dull Knife about charisma vampires. You know how you go to a party and you come home and you're tired because that one guy kept talking to you about his dissertation? That guy was me, a charisma vampire. Ray Bradbury wrote a short story called The Man Upstairs in his amazing collection, The October Country, about a little boy who befriends a boarder upstairs at his grandmother's house who only comes out at night and doesn't like silver. Rudyard Kipling in 1897 wrote a poem about a vampire, which he said it's really his wife, I think. And all of this comes around to this idea that we get from the Balkans about child vampires. Dhampir, they're called. And essentially what they are products of a male vampire and a female human. They're children of vampires. And sometimes they become vampires and other times they become vampire hunters. If you are completely awesome, then you know that this is sort of the basis for Blade, the Marvel Comics hero, and also the amazing movie starring Wesley Snipes and its amazing sequel directed by Guillermo del Toro. These sort of daywalkers, they have elements of both humans and vampires. But the idea of child vampires is a long one as well. This idea that once vampires become embodied in children, then even though they're 200, 300 years old, they can never grow older, and the frustration that entails. The first time that I saw it as a young child was in Near Dark, still my favorite vampire movie. I love Near Dark so much, directed by Catherine Bigelow. If you've not seen it, please go see it. There's a child vampire in that named Homer. If you get it wrong, I wouldn't want to be you, he says. And he's very, very upset. He tantrums a lot, and he wants a little girl to be his buddy. One of the ways that he gets victims is he pretends to be a little kid who's fallen off of his bike, and when someone leans over, a good Samaritan, to help him up, he bites them and kills them. And we see that scene sort of replicated in Let the Right One In, the movie that we're talking about today. The person who chose this movie is a dear friend and a brilliant artist. More importantly, his name is Peter Ramsey. I have a longer introduction though. Don't applaud yet, you guys. He is a gifted storyboard artist, a gifted illustrator, a gifted storyteller. He has worked with people like Francis Coppola on the aforementioned Bram Stoker's Dracula. He's worked with Spielberg a couple of times. If you love the way that AI looks, if you love the way that Minority Report looks, part of the reason is because Peter Ramsey is a freaking genius. He worked on Fight Club. He's worked with Fincher and Panic Room. My gosh, that's off the top of my head. Where else can I go from there? He was a second unit director on Poetic Justice and Higher Learning. He worked on Tank Girl with the great Rachel Talalay, which is the progenitor in many ways of the modern superhero cycle, and also a ferociously feminist piece. He is the first African-American director to get a big budget animated feature. He made Rise of the Guardians in 2012. I know most of you guys know what Rise of the Guardians is. If you don't, it's time for you to become acquainted. This is a movie that I forced my kids to watch. It didn't take a lot of forcing. Every Christmas, it became one of our Christmas movies, starting in about 2013 when my son was born. My God. No, that's not right. They were born way before that. I'm really bad at that. I can't even remember my birthday sometimes. But anyway, we started watching it as soon as it was released when they're much younger, and they still ask to see it now, even though they're hardened teenagers. It's become part of our Christmas ritual. It should be a perennial favorite. Make it one in your house. You have time. You got 2 more weeks. Watch it. Okay, it's great. And then he did a little movie that you might have heard of called Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, for which he won an Oscar. People that know Peter know that he is outspoken. He knows the right causes to support. He knows the right people to support. He's not afraid to say it. He's gotten into some fights on social media, which I don't recommend because I've been on the wrong end of some of those. Not with Peter, but just because, I don't know, I don't know any better. But he fights for the right things. And I cannot express to you my level of gratitude and admiration for having Peter in my life, not just for his art, but for him as a human being. And today, to talk a little bit about Let the Right One In. So everybody with a show of jazz hands, Peter Ramsey.
Thank you. Walter is way too kind. I wish I was I wish I was as magnificent as you make me sound, but thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thanks for having me here. This is really great.
Oh man. So let's just start with the obvious question then. Why Let the Right One In?
You know, I guess a couple of reasons. I mean, you and I had been talking, and you know, we'd been sharing a little bit of a few thoughts about vampires because I'd been working on a vampire project. I can say that much, and you know, just talking about them with you, and you know, the fact that I had worked on Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was kind of a formative experience for me early on in my movie career. Also, oddly enough, my wife is Swedish, so when I first saw this movie, it had a whole other kind of level of resonance for me. And so when we talked about, well, you know, what movie could we talk about? I guess vampires were on my brain, and Let the Right One In seemed like a nice nexus point between a lot of different things. You know, it's just an incredible movie.
Yeah, when I was rewatching it, it seems painterly almost, like it's almost illustrated in so many ways because it's so carefully framed out and so carefully laid out. All the mise en scène, as they say, is so meticulous. Would you talk a little bit about how the film is attractive to you as an artist? What are the things that are drawn to you visually by this movie?
Yeah, for me, it definitely has a kind Gem Cutter's precision to it, and the choosing of the images and the compositions. It's not a flashy movie in terms of camera movement or trying to be too razzle dazzly or innovative with the shot design. It's very austere, and that kind of comes for me. It comes out of that environment. When you're there in the winter and the snow and the stillness, it just lends itself to that sort of pacing and seeing the world that way. And I think it also comes out of the Tomas Alfredson. He's a Swedish. He's Swedish to the bone. My wife told me, oh yeah, he's actually the son of one of Sweden's greatest and most revered comedians. So he had kind of a lineage in Swedish culture, and I just think that there's this sort of there is a kind of stillness and a calm that they have that I guess it comes right out of the environment that I really felt was reflected in the movie. So all those things about it, I just found it really unique to set this story that has these bursts of violence and horror and just this unsettling undercurrent running through the whole thing that you think it's just because it's a vampire movie, but by the time you reach the end, for me at least, it kind of like just snapped something into focus that you had been intuiting in the back of your mind all along. And I just think it's incredible that way.
Yeah, I've told you a lot of times. I tell everybody that I know that Spider-Verse is not just about Spider-Man, that it's about bullying, and it's about lonesomeness, and it's about feeling out of place, and it's about looking for mentors and looking for connection. And we're in Spider-Verse, he finds the right mentor. In Let the Right One In, you could say he finds the wrong sort of mentor. But the loneliness, the massive loneliness that drives both of them, seems to be compelling. Is there a particular thing in your work, and I would even say a little bit Rise of the Guardians and some of the other stuff I know that you're working on, is there a little bit of something in your work that makes you identify with the outsider, with the lost boy?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I mean, I know growing up, it's interesting. I wasn't in an atmosphere where I was, like I grew up in South Central LA, so I wasn't, in terms of race, I wasn't isolated really or anything like that. At the same time, I was kind of a bookworm when I was a kid. I was kind of bookish, and my family was I don't know. Does this come from my family? Maybe. I don't know. We always kind of stuck out a little bit, and it took me a long time to figure this out. And this is a whole other tributary to go down, so I'm sorry. But we weren't in like the black church tradition. My mom was Catholic from New Orleans. That's a very different thing from like being like, in Baptist church. And so just socially, there was always a feeling of being slightly out of step that I never really understood. So anyway, that's for the autobiography. Sorry, I'm going to steer it back. But I was really interested in books and reading. My mom got me really reading very early, so I became a bookworm. So there was a little bit of the classic, oh, there goes Peter Ramsey. I heard you read the encyclopedia, kind of, a little bit of that stuff going on. But I think it did give me a sort of feeling of, there's the mass of society, and then there's you, and of course, it took me a long time to realize that everybody goes through a version of that. But, as a kid, you internalize that. And really, all my life, I've kind of rooted for underdogs. My wife and my son get mad at me when we're watching Lakers games because I'll like, the other team will score a cool basket, and I'll go, oh, that was great. And they'll be like, shut up. You're supposed to be rooting for the Lakers. But I can't help but root for the underdog, So,
if the Nuggets didn't play like 2 7-game series, we had a chance this year, man. I don't know. So, were you raised Catholic?
My mom tried. Yeah. I guess I was an altar boy for a little bit. I actually took guitar lessons when I was a kid, so I played, guitar on at a couple of masses. But I got to 13 and 14, and all that started going by the wayside.
I ask because Catholicism is the most vampiric of the Christian faiths.
For
There's,
sure.
when you look at like John 6:5-4 and 5:6, here we go. Amen, amen. I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you shall not have life in you.
Right.
He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has left life everlasting. I mean, I've tried to make the connection a lot between zombies and Christianity because, you're coming back after a couple of days. But aren't vampires actually the more compelling metaphor for Catholicism?
You could say that there's such a connection of blood and blood and power and the whole idea of guilt and that whole thing. And I think the other part of it, I know for me as a kid, the intellectual part of it, all that stuff went straight over my head, but the imagery and the iconography, all that stuff, and it's this impenetrable kind of thing. And why am I looking at this picture of a naked guy with a big gash in his side, with his heart on fire? What, just all the layers of mystery and surrealistic imagery kind of lend themselves to thoughts of just these otherworldly weird thoughts that really don't have anything to do with morality or even religion per se. They're just tapping into some other part of your mind that is the dark corners in there that you just don't understand.
Well, so much of that is about transformation, right? Baptism and thaumaturgical of transformation.
Transfiguration, that whole,
literally transfiguration. Yeah, that was one of the big fights that my wife and I had. Not really fights, but disagreements early on, was that, I don't think that they're kidding when they say it's flesh and blood. It's literal. That's actually in the liturgy. But, the image in Let the Right One early of him, of Haxon, the first familiar, raising the body up, upside down, reminded me in a perverse way, because I knew we were talking about it, I guess, probably more specifically, of when Miles Morales puts on the spider suit for the first time and takes that leap of faith, and he's upside down, also suspended in a similar way.
Wow.
Both moments of transformation, right? One for obvious reasons, one for the other. Can you talk to me about, in regards to this film, and also in regards to your work, that the importance of growing and evolving and transforming, not just from a story point, but from maybe a personal point for you in these stories?
Yeah. It's funny, both of those stories, I would never in a million years have drawn any connection between Spider-Verse and Let the Right One In, but they are both coming of age stories. They are both stories about kids who make a connection with someone and find a common bond in somebody who's more different from them than they could, than you could ever imagine, quite literally in Let the Right One In. So that idea of connection, finding your own tribe or your own group, your own family in a way, and making a conscious decision to go that way is definitely a strong tie between both of those things. And I guess, by accident, that's sort of in Rise of the Guardians too, to go there. That whole story is about a guy who is completely isolated, has kind of an eternal life like a vampire, but has never had a close connection with anyone, and finds a place. It's with Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy, but boy, this is crazy. I never would have compared any of these movies to each other. It's absolutely insane.
It's all there, and it had to be a reason that you picked this movie, Peter, because it doesn't just the vampire element, right?
This one it's just so, like, I just remember the feeling I had the first time I saw it when it came to the end, and the just the implications of that ending, and just like what it really means. It just like hit me like a sledgehammer the first time I saw it. I hope everybody has seen it, because it's really something else.
So the Morse code at the end, she taps kiss, and he taps back small kiss.
Oh, wow.
with this.
I was wondering what it was at the end,
And
man.
it's funny because I've heard some people, especially when it first came out, talk to me about it as though it were a warm, sort of a nice movie. And for me, it's like it's the opposite of warm, literally.
That's right.
But the idea that Ellie is actually maybe just a monster who needs help to be monster, right? That she's not this, or they is not this thing that Oscar thinks. And you know, he's told that. Ellie tells him that. I'm not a girl.
Yeah. Yeah. What if it wasn't a girl?
I'm not a girl. And we just think, oh, they mean vampire. But no, there's something much different. And in the book, it's based on a book that was released about 4 years before the film. He's been castrated by an evil vampire lord, sort of. And some of those shots were filmed for the movie as flashbacks to sort of explain it.
Oh, interesting.
And then left out and said, hey, no, it's just better that we don't have this conversation. It doesn't matter that much. It just matters this idea about coming into knowing who you are and identity. That the identity element of the movie is better without it. Without origin stories. It's like we have this,
probably.
We have this mania for origin stories now, right?
Yeah. And it's so much nicer sometimes to keep some of these things a little hidden. There is that one cut of her. She's putting on the mother's dress. There's that brief shot that you could see. Okay, something went on down there, but I don't want anybody to catch me screaming on this one. Yeah.
And so much more powerful for that, the brevity of that and the suggestion of it than it is for anything else. Okay, there's this vampire is, if nothing else, is ancient because we haven't been doing that for a while. Hopefully, not in Europe anyway. And so there's something really lovely about that element. Did you think about any like immigrant issues with this film or outsider issues in terms of the Ellie character, not just Oscar being bullied, but Ellie being obviously different, like Slavic, perhaps, not Scandinavian?
Well, I didn't think about it with Oscar. He looks pretty Swedish through and through. With Ellie, I mean, definitely, when you're in Sweden and it's a situation that's actually like intensified over the years. There was the Romani population there. That's a big issue in Sweden, and it's you see the Romani people in in urban environments or begging or like on the streets or whatever. And there's obviously, as in all across Europe, there's a huge anti-immigrant backlash, and I'm sure when this movie came out, her character was seen as somewhat of a nod to that idea of this outsider influence and I mean, she looks like very un-Swedish. She almost looks Middle Eastern or something. Ellie does.
Yeah, I think the actress is half Persian.
So I think that was probably definitely sort of I mean, I guess it was a conscious thing in terms of like saying, well, this is a person from an ancient, different culture. But, I mean, hey, that's exactly what it is when you're talking about a modern European city and immigrants.
Well, even when we go back to your work on Dracula and Dracula itself, Dracula is from Transylvania, is from Romania. He's this outsider. He's a decadent example of a dead empire coming into London and buying, a church. It's like, this sort of intrusion from the outsider, which is one of the foundational, I think, reasons why we have mythologies to begin with, the sort of xenophobic idea that someone's going to come in and they want our women and they also want our real estate.
Dracula literally does that. He's literally a real estate mogul.
That kind of reminds me of Lex Luthor, he's the worst person, who's the worst villain in the universe, and he's actually just a real estate developer is what he is, a real estate agent.
Sounds familiar.
There's some wisdom to this. There's some wisdom to that. I know you can't talk about it very much, but you are, Spider-Verse 2 is currently being worked on, and you've seen some of it, and you say it looks pretty good, right?
Oh yeah, it's very, very early days. I mean, if it's anything like the first one, it's like it'll completely, everything that's in there now will completely change a couple of times before it's done. But there's ultra talented guys working on it. I'm so proud of them, and it's it's gonna be pretty spectacular. I mean, so much of what was innovative and new in the first movie is just being expanded on and taken to all kinds of different places. So it'll be really fun.
And I really want to ask you. I just asked you that because I'm a fanboy and I have to do that. But um, what are some other vampire movies that you like? Since we're talking about vampires today, are there a few that you'd throw out there as recommendations that people maybe haven't seen or should see?
Let me see. Well, there's the Christopher Lee Hammer, the horror of Dracula. That's always fun because it's such a different take on the character than the Bela Lugosi. There you go.
Yes.
Bela Lugosi. Let me see. What other vamp? You know what I just saw again not long ago after not having seen it like in decades was The Hunger.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
Man, that movie blew me away this time.
1983, Tony Scott, right?
I remember at the time, I remember the first time I ever saw it, I was like, yeah, it's a little perfume commercially to me, but but this time I saw it, I was just like stunned and just like completely blown away by how gorgeous it was. I absolutely loved it.
Just from a cinematography and design aspect of it, all the gauziness and everything, it reminds of a Jean Roland film, the French filmmaker. But the opening sequence with Bela Lugosi's dead with Bauhaus, man, that set me on a musical path of all those bands, Bauhaus, Love and Rockets, Depeche, even The Cure, all that stuff. That's kind of the wellspring of a lot of that. The Hunger was so influential for me, and also Susan Sarandon. And Catherine Deneuve, making out. That was a big moment for me as well, for other reasons.
David Bowie's in it.
Well, David Bowie, that's right. Some guy named David Bowie. But I sort of put together a little list. The list of vampire movies is extravagantly long, but so we're not going to go deep, and there's a lot of favorites that will be missed. But Nosferatu, of course, stars.
Oh yeah, of course. Both versions actually.
Really both versions. The Herzog version's awesome. My favorite story about the Herzog version is that he actually bought every rat in that city, plus from universities and pet stores, and he painted them all gray and black, and then he released them into the city from the ship during that one sequence where the Dracula arrives, right? Yeah. And the descendants of the rats are still infesting that city. They've never gotten rid of those. That's Herzog for you. He just doesn't care about you. Of course, Dracula, 1931. The big Universal moment. Carl Dreyer did Vampire in 1932, a sound movie which acts like a silent movie essentially. Isle of the Dead, which I mentioned from 1943. The creature in that's called a Vorvolica, but it's not really a creature. The creature in that is grief. It's a beautiful film. The first Italian horror movie, directed partially by Mario Bava, is called I Vampiri. That's a vampire film. Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, amazing movie. The Velvet Vampire in America from 1971. George Romero's Martin from 1971. Oh yeah. Salem's Lot, the TV series from 1979 that ruined a lot of us when we were too young to watch it. The Hunger, as you mentioned. Life Force from 1985, the Tobe Hooper space vampire movie with a woman who's naked for the first hour of it, I think. But it's amazing. It's amazing. There's a great anime film called Vampire Hunter D. Oh, yeah. By Yoshiaki Kawajiri, which is brilliant. Have you seen that? Are you familiar, Peter?
Ages ago, yeah.
Yeah, I love Kawajiri. He's the same guy who did Ninja Scroll. Which is
Ninja Scroll is awesome.
One of the deeply fine action movies ever made, I think. And then 1987 comes, which is really the matinee of my movie-going experience with The Lost Boys.
Right.
Yes, Alex Winter, and then Near Dark, which
Near Dark is also fantastic.
Man, you just got Near Dark. That's amazing. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, 1992, but more importantly, maybe the TV series. And, that sort of opens the door to stuff like Twilight, which is, I think, really kind of appalling, but interesting for how culturally pervasive it became very quickly. The Underworld series of movies with Kate Beckinsale, very interesting movies. Hammer's Dracula films, Jean Rollins' erotic vampire films, which are really great. But so many things. But we could talk for hours. Let's talk about what people want to talk about. What are some questions that people have for us, Daria?
I don't know how to unmute myself. I got it. Okay. Aurora wanted to see if there was any significance in, say, like the color palettes that were used for Oscar versus Ellie. Like they were visibly different, and then I think their clothes and their settings when they're separate were different. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I'll let the artist answer the question, and then I'll chime in. What do you think, Peter, about the different color palettes that were sort of dedicated?
I'm sure there is some significance and a reason. I know that I'm thinking back on it now, and I'm trying to recall. Ellie ends up in a lot of these kind of pale, kind of muted, kind of drab colors until she puts on the dress that Oscar's mother lends her, which is this deep red, kind of blood red dress almost. That was kind of interesting. And I remember the scene kind of sticking out to me when Oscar's at his dad's house. There's a thing where he's got this little red kind of jacket that he puts on, and it popped out to me because I couldn't remember if he'd had that red jacket all along or what, but it was like, oh, that's really popping in this scene. And so those were the couple of times I started thinking about color in the movie. But I'm sure, if you went back through and really tracked it, that you'd start to see something emerge. And there may be something, I don't know if Ellie's color progression evolves as the movie goes on. It very well may, I wonder, now you've got me curious. I wonder if you go back through and their colors start to merge as they get closer together. It could be that, but
Yeah.
I'm sure there is some kind of symbology going on.
Absolutely, and Hitchcock was famous about the use of red, in his films. He was very, very good about that. Like North by Northwest, where the Eve Kendall character, the Eva Marie Saint, plays in that movie, as she becomes more and more of stained by what she does. She goes from red as a seductress to black by the end of it. Or the Being of Psycho, black and white, obviously, but she's wearing black lingerie. Marion is, and then she's wearing white when she decides to return the money right before she's murdered. She becomes the virgin sacrifice in a way. But the use of color is, the specificity of certain visual cues is something that to really watch for in Peter's films as well. With Spider-Verse, you used different animation techniques for different characters. You used different animation techniques for different movements within the thing for different characters. I only know all this because my son is obsessed and he's listened to the commentary and watched all the videos about it. But and has a poster over his bed, by the way, Peter. I think I sent you that picture. But there's clearly something going on with Alfredson's work, and as much as there is in here, there's even more. I think in a second movie, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which is all shot with sort of a sepia filter. It's a gorgeous looking movie, but man, very painterly. It's very much an artist's film. His first two movies. His last one, The Snowman, is a bit of a disaster. We can talk about that separately, but his first two movies are really kind of extraordinary as painter's pieces. And just in another sense, in terms of color, we did sort of touch on this idea that Ellie is dark in her face and her features, and Oscar is very white. Very pale, very, very pale, so pale. And the dichotomy between them, it's almost like the Suzanne Plachette versus Tippi Hedren characters in The Birds. They are photo negatives and opposites of one another. One's the shadow of the other, and one represents everything that the other isn't.
Yeah, and I think it's also probably very consciously, I was thinking a lot in this movie about, the way that the audience is invited to empathize and with Oscar, the bullying. I mean, immediately, your heart goes out to the kid, and he's kind of this, he's pale, prepubescent. I mean, he's soft looking. He's like it's almost like he's pretty much like a baby. It's like you've got a soft little baby that's being like brutalized over the course of this movie. But there's the other undercurrent. The first time you see him, he's kind of like, he looks naked and he's holding a knife and he's threatening someone to squeal like a pig. And the movie's telling you right there is something in this kid that is waiting to fester into something really, really bad.
Well, and that final scene in the pool, right? That's baptism, isn't it?
Yeah.
When someone takes your head and pushes you under the water, and then he's reborn at the end of the film into something else. He's complete, and that smile, that exchange of looks and the smile and the recognition of one another.
Yeah, and he has that expression like when he hits the kid in the ear. There's
with the
moment of like, bliss of like,
transformation, right? Of it's something holy that's happened now in his development. Not for the good, I guess. Other
Wow.
questions, Ari?
Yes, actually, let's let's get into this funny mood and talk about the cat attack. Do you guys have anything to say about that at all?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm afraid of cats. I can't read them at all. They're like, I know that's their attraction, but cats are always scratching me. They love me. They're purring. Now they're scratching me. I'm bleeding. So there's that. But traditionally, I think in vampire myth, animals know. They're either familiars or they're warnings. Like dogs traditionally warn you about when there's a vampire around. It's almost like with the Terminator, right? And so there are stories about, like the Scottish succubus, that it's a giant dog in one of the stories that scares her away because dogs are protectors in that way. And I think it's interesting that they have this cat attack. There's a notorious cat attack in a Dario Argento film called Inferno. And Inferno is sort of like a remake of The Birds in a weird way, and he replaces birds with cats, which is, I think, fascinating. But cats have sort of a supernatural quality to them, and they're drawn to that. Peter, do you have any other thoughts about cats?
Cats in that sequence. It's a fantastic idea that they would so immediately attack something that's unnatural, something that's like shouldn't be there, shouldn't exist. The digital work hasn't aged all that well, so it's kind of like, okay, that makes it gave it a comedic edge for me. That really because otherwise the story of that character is just like my heart was just like, oh my God, that poor woman. It's just terrible. It's terrible. So I really, as part of that story, and this poor woman just wondering what the hell is happening to her, it just because her life before that was no bag of roses either. So I just feel so sorry for her.
It's such a remarkable scene, and it's done in it was the most difficult shot of the film, according to the director, according to Alfredson, that they used practical effects. They had stuffed cats that they would throw at the actress.
Oh, wow.
Just like in The Birds, they had stuffed birds, and they had real cats as well. And it took a long time to composite all of those scenes. There's actually a couple hundred digital effect shots in this movie that are mostly hidden. I mean, they're difficult to see if you're looking for them. I don't know why you would, but they're in there. And you have much experience with that. How. So I would say 95% of all digital effects are invisible. That when people say, I don't like CGI, it's like, well, you actually don't know. I think there's 600 special effects shots in Parasite, digital shots. And so it's like, anyway, so it was a difficult scene to shoot as well, on top of it being kind of a fun scene, an awesome scene. I love that scene. I love the scene where she bursts into flames too.
Oh God,
I laugh a lot during this movie, not because it's funny at all, but out of delight. I have this thing where if I'm delighted by something, I kind of I laugh. And this movie does that to me a lot. That was one of them. Yeah. Daria, other questions?
Yes. Awesome. I did want to point out that I misinterpreted Aurora's question. I asked it incorrectly, but you guys actually answered it, I think, to what she wanted to hear, which is pretty impressive. It had to do with their appearances and the societal implications. So, for me, could you guys talk a little bit about the crumbling egg? And it's also something that was asked in the chat. I didn't quite understand the purpose of it. Was it to signify that she doesn't really need money?
I didn't remember the egg from the first time seeing it, and I'm surprised I didn't remember because it's such a weird detail. And I don't know what it is. I'm assuming, though, because I did remember reading someplace that she was actually really ancient. So I assumed that it was something she got from the Library of Alexandria or stole from Catherine the Great, or I don't know, something that and then she has that line, if you sold this, you could buy a whole nuclear power plant. And I was like, okay, what's the deal with that?
Yeah,
So
there's There's so much there, right? I mean, there's that you talk about with the ancientness. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go
No,
ahead,
no,
Peter.
no, 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 no. Go right ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just going to agree with you that I think it does talk about her age and her experience. Like she is very well traveled. You know, she's been all over the world. We presume, and of course,
Mm-hmm.
Oscar has not. He's the definition of innocence. I think there's also the element of the foreigner that's attached
Mm-hmm.
to that, with the
Mm-hmm.
the sort of a Russian influence,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps into
Mm-hmm.
Slavic influence
For sure.
into
Mm-hmm.
Scandinavia, and we're as an American, when I first watched it, I didn't think as much about it as I do now.
Mm-hmm.
About the
Yeah.
the deadliness sometimes of Slavic interference into our affairs.
Mm-hmm.
But and then she mentions nuclear power plant, and I think there's the sense too of harm that this thing, Ellie,
Mm-hmm.
that we want to anthropomorphize is actually a monster, and her thoughts are always given towards apocalypse, or always pointing towards
Interesting.
apocalypse. And that was the thing that she would tell like a 12-year-old boy. Is like, nah, you could buy a whole collection of knives, you could buy a whole
Right.
you could buy comic books to your heart's content. Like, you could buy a nuclear power plant if you wanted. There's sort of a
Yeah.
grooming going on throughout the course of the
Definitely.
film, right?
That's what I think. I mean, I remember hearing it and going, oh, it's such an outsized and slightly more sophisticated reference than you would imagine making to a kid that age. And it felt like, on the one hand, it felt like her telling him, I can take care of you no matter what.
Yes.
You would never have to worry about money if you hung out with me.
Well,
And
and
also it just spoke to a worldliness that she had that, if I was that age, I would have thought, wow, she's like a real grown up.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep, and that's exactly why I find like the Twilight movies to be so kind of repugnant.
Mm.
Just in conception is this idea that this 160-year-old guy is hitting on a 17-year-old girl.
Right.
When Bella first goes over to the house, he's like, "You have an amazing record collection," and like, oh, gross. Gross. That's gross because he's 120. He's 160 years old. Man,
Right.
none of
Right.
this is okay. But yeah, there's that element too, and there's also a puzzle element that's attached to
Yeah.
Ellie. Right? She loves puzzles.
Something hidden inside. The real thing is hidden inside.
Yep. And there's yes, exactly right, there's elements of that, and also there's a lot of demon mythology and stuff about the way that you slow these demons, or you slow vampires sometimes, is you throw a knot at them, you throw
Mm-hmm.
something at them, because they can't stop, they can't hunt you because they're too obsessed with unraveling the knot. They're too
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with unraveling the puzzle. There's stuff in trying to
Wow,
like
that kind
that.
of goes
So
back to the Rubik's cube.
exactly right, she loves puzzles, right? And so for her to own like sort of collection of history's puzzles
Mm-hmm.
would be something that she was obsessed with, like a cat would be obsessed with. Like you can distract them,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. And this is one of the things that she collects as catnip for vampires, if you will. Part of a maybe growing mythology for that
Mm-hmm.
from this film. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Other thoughts? We have 3 minutes. Daria, any other
Free
questions?
rap.
It,
Free rap time.
free rap time. All right.
Rap about it.
It's over
Yeah.
already. Oh, can I just squeeze in one thought about the end?
Do it.
Man, the end. I mean, after the whole thing in the pool, which is just like, we talked about that. It's kind of this crazy baptism, and the thing is, as an audience, you hate those kids so much that inside you're kind of fantasizing about something like that happening to them anyway, and then it actually happens, and you kind of realize, oh my God, your identification and you're buying into Oscar's experience is so complete that it actually happens. And then he hits you with what it really means at the end, the shot on the train and her in the box. And you realize this whole thing was her recruiting the next guy to replace the old guy who wasn't up to the job anymore. She needed somebody younger and stronger and smarter. And I mean, there's that reading that, no, it's never been about warmth. It's never been about love. It's been about her being a vampire and like needing someone else to prey on and to help her prey.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, the first time I saw it, it just like, oh no, it kind of ruined my day. It's so bleak.
Yeah. Well, it's a 200-year-old being, right? Who's actually
Yeah.
literally grooming a young child to become something for service for them. And the thought that lingered with me after the end was that the old man, the former familiar, probably started out as a kid
He
with her.
was Oscar. He had, I mean, and that like pierces your heart too when you
Yeah.
realize that, oh no, it's the same story of that old guy, you know,
Yeah.
that's exactly who Oscar is going to become.
And I think part of the brilliance of this film, though, too, is that there's so much pleasure in watching the bullies get murdered. And
Yeah.
then he does this extreme long shot, which he does with this throughout the film, where you're forced to consider the whole tableau. And to see those little bodies in the last
Yeah.
surviving bully weeping on a bench, like,
Hmm.
those kids are my son's age.
Yeah.
There's something suddenly not romantic about this. You know, it's like every time I show a history of violence to a classroom, everybody cheers when Vigo goes nuts on the gangsters at the end of it. And then the first question I challenge them with is, why is that funny? Why did you
Hmm.
have such a good time there? You know, our expectations in this film are so undermined throughout all of it. You expect the regular vampire things, but she doesn't live in a gothic castle. She lives
Hmm.
in a tenement, right? She's like
Hmm.
a subsistence level vampire. You know,
Hmm.
her buddy puts blood in dirty jugs to bring home. You know,
Hmm.
it's not sexy. It's not glamorous. All these things that we kind of attach to the most well known, I guess, pieces of vampire fiction are not there, and it undermines that. Even to the end, it undermines our catharsis in a way because we want to see Ellie flying around. I want to
Yeah.
see her full vamp, man. Doesn't let us
Hmm.
do it. Doesn't let us do it. We see the results always. We never
Right.
see the thing in progress. And so,
Right.
really brilliant patient film. So anyway, Peter has a hard stop today. He's working on his new project called Lost Ollie for Netflix. I think it's 4 episodes.
Mhm.
It's I don't know. I don't want to say too much about it. I've seen some stills from it. It is gorgeous. It looks amazing. Peter, is there anything that you want to say about it to sort of tease?
Yeah, I'm working at my very good friend Shannon Tyndall, who if anybody's seen the movie Kubo and the Two Strings, the animated feature, Shannon created that movie, and he's just a brilliant writer and director and artist, and we've been friends for several years. And this is something that he adapted from a book by William Joyce, who coincidentally wrote the original material that Rise of the Guardians was based on. And but Shannon's taken this. I think the book's called Ollie's Odyssey. Shannon's kind of taken that and kind of riffed on it and like really adapted it into something super special and unique. And it's basically it's a story about kind of love and loss and how people deal with loss. And it's a little boy loses his toy rabbit and they both try to find each other again. So it kind of toggles back and forth between live action and animation.
Yeah, it's a perfect movie, a perfect capper for a perfect series for a year of loss. I think a year of
Mm-hmm.
hardship for all of us. I think in
Mm-hmm.
one way or another. Anyway, thank you again to the great Peter Ramsey. He is not only a brilliant artist, he's a remarkable human being. I hope that you pick up Rise of the Guardians. Please watch that, man. Watch it with your family. Watch it just to feel young again. It's so good. All the things that you like about Spider-Verse are in Rise of the Guardians already. You know, he
Oh,
was telling you already. So, and I love
thank
Spider-Verse, of
you.
course. If you've not seen that, please watch it. Thank you so much, Peter, for coming on today.
Oh, thank you. It was such a pleasure and an honor, Walter. Like I said, you know, this guy, I've always kind of revered him as a critic. So to count him as a friend and to be able to hang out is, it's a real honor for me. So thank you. And great to see all of you.
Yeah, it's great to see you.